Dante. All right, Lee, can we put on Dr. Fisk's presentation here? And ladies and gentlemen, you're going to hear from Dr. Fisk. Like I said, Dr. Fisk is a neurologist at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles. Dr. Fisk.
Thank you, Robert. Good evening. A neurologist does a lot of things, one of which is get to talk to good people like you, help explain complicated problems, and we are into an area of complicated problems, which I'm going to try to simplify to some extent, but just to some extent. You'll see in a minute or two that I'm going to demonstrate to you, reveal to you that there are ways to approach the health problems engendered by these toxic environments. There are an array of symptoms. The brain and spinal cord and nerves are the ones that I'm going to focus on, but nevertheless they interplay with the functionality of the entire human being. So it's axiomatic in medicine that you never treat the test result, you treat the individual. The wonderful thing about dealing with adults is they can tell you what's wrong. You take the time to ask the questions and form the pattern of the illness. And so that's what I'm going to give to you tonight, broad brush strokes. So in point of fact, you begin to understand the boundaries of the problem, the range of symptoms that can evolve again, particularly with respect to the nervous system, and in particular, how to approach your health assessment. So Rex mentioned specifically that not everybody will be ill. Not everybody is going to be sick, or if you're sick, the good news is that a significant number of you won't be severely ill. You won't require heroic measures to recuperate, or simply avoidance, perhaps exiting the area, perhaps other measures will be more than adequate. Some of you, unfortunately, will not be able to benefit just in those simple ways, but will require medical intervention, beginning with diagnosis and ultimately the therapies that are available, and finally, most importantly, to be able to predict the future. So with those prefatory remarks, let me just move ahead with the slides.
And Dr. Fisk, I was just advised no one can see you because you're in the dark over here. So why don't we stand in the light so everyone can see how good looking your tie is.
That's not why I'm here tonight, ladies and gentlemen. Okay. So, hydrocarbon toxicity. Hydrocarbon is just the medical term for the substances to which you are exposed. Hydrocarbon literally means hydro for hydrogen, carbon for the carbon atom. And these are essentially the building blocks of the human being. Virtually every major chemical product, every chemical interaction involves molecules which are in fact composed of carbon and hydrogen, with then additional elements such as oxygen. The areas that we're going to deal with here in terms of the exposure to these hydrocarbons, obviously we can see that they take many different forms, most of which are relatively benign because in fact we can control our exposures. So whether it's paints or thinners or gasoline fumes, rubber cement, obviously we have control of those environments. We don't have control over organic gases, which is our focus tonight. All right, so the issue here is to look at the areas of the body that are most commonly involved. Now again, I'm just going to touch briefly on this subject area, given the fact that I'm focusing mostly on the brain and the nerves. But obviously, the major modes of exposure are going to be inhalation, breathing it into the lungs, ingestion, swallowing it, dermal exposure. Those primarily are going to be the mechanisms by which we're adversely affected. Dermal exposure means contact with the skin in a chronic irritated state. The organs that are most at risk not only are the nervous system, but obviously we have the heart in particular, an onerous organ once involved, then the liver, the kidneys, the skin itself, as well as the blood. one issue which is not quite so obvious, which is worthy of mentioning, is the point of fact that we actually can swallow a liquid which then vaporizes, and then in that fashion it actually is inhaled into the lungs. Now, most of these chemicals that we're going to be dealing with fall into the category of volatile organic chemicals, VOCs. All that simply means that in the liquid state they rapidly vaporize and they turn into a gas. I'm going to go over, there are a number of doctors here, I'm going to go over a lot of this very rapidly, so the other experts will cover their individual areas. All right. The heart and blood vessel issues, the major obvious issues here are going to be potential for heart attacks, arrhythmias, fainting. Those are the symptoms that in particular are potential adverse consequences of exposure.
Point it, yeah, there you go. Point it up to the clock there.
Okay. All right. Here we get to the skin areas, and this is going to be essentially just surface exposure. Around the mouth, into the mouth itself, the lips and the face, and blistering and redness for areas of the skin. Right, and then this is going to be a list of the gases, or at least the potential exposures that have to be taken into account when you see your individual physicians. The importance of recognizing this list is, number one, that the individual chemicals have different impact on various parts of the body, and that doesn't even take into account the fact that once you disrupt the function of one organ system, that predisposes to malfunction of other organ systems, and sometimes there can be a total crash of the entire range of bodily functions. These gases that are identified from the top, the range of gases are anything from the mercaptans, which are the gases that you smell. I'm not going to worry too much about the names here. This list is going to be available to you, and the importance of this list I'll address in a second. But some of these chemicals are particularly onerous. So, for example, benzene is the one drug here, in particular the one chemical here, that is most likely to produce, or among this list, most likely to produce cancer, and that's particularly of the white cells, which would be lymphomas and leukemias. Hexane, which is another common exposure, is the one that's most likely to cause peripheral neuropathies. Peripheral neuropathy essentially is going to be a problem which presents with numbness and tingling, frequently weakness and incoordination of the extremities, usually beginning in the hands or the feet initially, and then gradually ascending, gradually moving closer to the center of the body. Toluene is an omnipresent chemical. It's abundant and from many different forms. It is frequently used by misled adolescents as a form of euphoria-inducing mechanism, but it is a potential major hazard to the brain. This can result in not only the transient euphoric state, but ultimately in seizures, coma, and death. So this is a major issue depending on the degree of exposure. Okay. I'm going to wrap this up here just quickly. Maybe. All right, so the physicians that you might want to consider specifically, depending on your symptoms, usually it's the best idea, first of all, is to write your symptoms down. It sounds like a simple thing to do, but what the doctor is going to be asking you are going to be questions that you should be able to anticipate. The doctor essentially wants to know what the problem is, and then its characteristics. How often, how intense, where, what factors make it better, what factors make it worse. These are common sense questions, but you can anticipate them. And once you have the answers available, it accelerates the process of deduction and leads better to the appropriate testing procedures, diagnosis, and treatment. The physician that you would start with after the internist would depend on the particular organ system that's involved. If you're having breathing difficulties and exacerbation of your asthma, you'd see a lung doctor. In point of fact, you're having neurological problems, headaches, nausea, vomiting, dizziness, numbness, tremors, problems with balance and coordination, you would see a neurologist. And then beyond that, a toxicologist, in point of fact, you're dealing with potential for multiple organic and toxic exposures and their interaction. Outline. Okay, then let me just finish this way. For many of us, while this is a broad spectrum approach to the range of information you need, it doesn't provide you with the detail that you will absolutely need. Now, for many of us here in the audience, in fact, most of us are not MDs, most of us don't have much in the way of precise medical experience. Most of us, though, fortunately, have a reasonable educational background. So it's well within your ability to take the time to use the internet to accumulate knowledgeable sources which will guide you in terms of the questions you should ask yourself, questions you should address in your environment, and information you need to bring to your doctor. Those sources of information include three in particular: the Agency for Toxic Substances and Disease Registry, ATSDR, the Environmental Agency specifically, which also is a very detailed list of symptoms and exposures, and then the MSDS, the Material Safety Data Sheets. All of these sheets, in fact, reflect the information that you will need to understand, once the chemical environments have been identified, what your risks are, and that in turn will lead to seeing the physician, diagnosing the problem, and hopefully remediating the problem fully. Thank you very much.